Yes, my name is Jerry Zaleski with a company called Institutional Specialties, and we represent Daktronics scoreboards. I emailed all of you individually, board members individually, requesting consideration for our equipment and company in the scoreboard for the stadium. That was not given to us or not afforded to us in the conversations that were had previously, and I'm asking for that now. I have information to distribute. I know Mr. McIntyre and I have talked directly. He'd asked for 3 different proposals, one of which keeping the board as is, replacing it as is, and then doing the consideration that would be equivalent to what you heard from OES. Because I was not asking for this in that I asked for a meeting, but not knowing what the expectations are of the board, I kind of need a little bit of direction as far as what I'm allotted here with my time.
I think it's,
5 minutes?
yeah, 5 minutes would be tops, and it's more or less question, answer, I would think.
My apologies to the rest of you, and I'll just hand this out. You guys can distribute this. I've got 11 copies here, so starting with board members and just pass it through. Oh, excuse me, wrong one. Wrong one, my bad. Next, please. For the record, there was some confusion as to what all transpired, at least with our company in presenting on this item. There was an initial meeting on or about March 1st where I was asked to come in and discuss your consideration for a new scoreboard. That meeting mostly focused around funding and sponsorships and what other school districts have done in the area that we've been involved with, and how they raised money. And what you were considering doing. We talked only basically in design, or what you were considering doing here for Gateway. We had an additional meeting on campus on March 23rd. Present with that were just Bob Brown and George Laplovich. Unfortunately, Dr. Short wasn't able to attend that one. He had a last-minute change of plans. In that meeting, we talked more specifically about a design and some of the installation logistics. That resulted in us submitting some renderings to you on April 4th that had some ideas based on that meeting. Those renderings were further revised by Bob Brown on the 13th of April in a phone call, and that was because of the conversation that you had started with OES and trying to make some of our ideas similar to what they were offering. During all these times, all of our information presented to you was budgetary in nature, because in our mind there wasn't yet a definite specific quantity, size, included equipment, accessories, etc., that was to be included in the package. That conversation still needed to be had, at least in my mind. There were never any written specifications on this. All the information and ideas were all verbal in nature. And that was on the 15th of April that I presented that last go-around with some budgetary information to Mr. Brown, and had asked for a meeting to finalize all that so that we could submit a formal proposal. I got a phone call on April 30th stating that the board had made a decision in your April 26th meeting to allocate funds for a scoreboard purchase, but yet we had never been given that opportunity. And that's what I'm here asking for now. In that sheet that I just handed out to you, I'm going to summarize your considerations this way, that you basically can do one of 3 things. You can keep the board as is. As a manufacturer, and we were the vendor that supplied that board originally, we can guarantee that we can keep it operational for a period of at least 3 years, possibly 5. There is nothing in that board that is still not made today by the factory. I've gone through the service that we've done on that board since installation in 06, and can detail that to the board as well. But essentially, it has not been anything of catastrophic in nature, nor expensive, etc. To the best of my knowledge, that board is functional today 100% as it should be. If there have been problems, I am not aware of it. No one has made us aware of it. The last service call we did last year was for a $600 repair on a power supply. If I don't know about it, I can't fix it. So option number 1, keep the board as is until you decide on your funding and some of these other things as far as how do you want to pay for anything new additional that you want to do down there. Option 2, you could replace it with something similar. In that proposal there, that would be roughly a $45,000 expenditure to the district. And your third option would be to go with what was discussed at your last board meeting with a completely new board presented by OES. I would like the opportunity to present what we have to do there. Unfortunately, 5 minutes time, there's not sufficient time to go into all the details and everything that you need to be aware of. But highlighted there in the bottom a section of what I just handed to you, from what I've been able to find out, the display that we were talking about in our budgetary information was 8% larger. It was of a better resolution. There were some inclusions with things that we're doing on the scoreboard with electronic naming that we were including, new delay of game clocks that aren't in the proposal that you heard from OES. The sound system, there were no details whatsoever of what was being proposed there by the other company. The system we are proposing to you is one of 26 other ones that we have that are similar to that in that area. It exists today. It's not just speakers that you're going to put in a cabinet and put a little bit of mesh around it and call it an enclosure. The power, and this came off the other specification, that the power of the board from OES is going to be considerably higher. It uses a total of 185 amps, and we're only going to be 185 by OES, 125 for ourselves. Why is that important? That's cost. While you're operating this thing, it's using more power. It's going to cost you more money to operate it. You have multiple manufacturers in that other proposal, at least 3. You have a scoreboard company, a video display company, and you have a sound company. With our company, Daktronics, we do everything 100% in-house. So if there's any problems, you need service work, you're only calling one organization, not 3. We offer local service. We have 4 technicians in Pittsburgh alone that can service our equipment. And we are now offering a guarantee that anything that is made by Daktronics, that we promise that we can either repair or replace it for a period of not less than 10 years from the date of installation. The reason for that is because there is a lot of Chinese product coming in right now. In the Chinese manufacturing model, you can order something today, want to buy the identical item 6 months from now, and you can leave in a completely different supply chain in the Chinese market, which is why they offer a lot of spare parts, so that you have some spare parts when something breaks. But the problem is, if you need to get those spare parts repaired, A, they're going overseas, and B, do you know if they even have the capability of being able to repair them. For a district that's thinking about investing $250,000 or $300,000, I think there's more information that you need to be aware of in order to make that a better decision as to what's the best usage of those types of funds, given that dollar amount that you're considering spending. I would like to have the appropriate amount of time that I assume the other company was given to present some of the same information, just with a little bit more detail. I have a proposal book that can be available, but I recognize that there is a time allotment here, and I want to respect that. And at this point, I'll answer any questions.
Does this board have any questions for Mr. Zielinski?
Yeah, I do. When we were at the last meeting and we said we needed a final offer from your company, and you came across with like a $380,000 offer, has that changed now?
The $380,000 offer was for a scoreboard that was almost 40 feet wide. And that's where we initially went after our conversation on March the 23rd. Mr. Brown revised that later in a phone call asking for a 25-foot wide scoreboard that I gave him a budget number of $300,000 in an email. And in that email is also when I said, look, because there are 2 companies involved now, you need to compare apples and apples. And I don't believe that was done. You've got really ideas and proposals, but without the way to kind of make a comparative between the 2 as to what all the specifics are, what the nuts and bolts are, it becomes difficult unless you're in that business to be able to do that. So, George, to answer that question, no. I mean, in my mind, we are always on a budgetary nature. I was never asked to present a formal proposal, be it written or otherwise, that would spell out everything that we are intending to do, because in a lot of the circumstances, there were a lot of details that still needed to be worked out. You're going to do a video board, but we hadn't determined how you're going to get that video image that you want to run through your own internal television network, but then run it through our equipment in order to get it to the board. Well, that equipment exists in the high school. So now you've got to interface something in the high school with down at the stadium in order to go to the board. Well, how is all that going to happen? So there's a lot of things on the installation side and some of those details and what equipment was going to be needed that was never answered or never calculated as far as I knew about. And those were the types of questions that when Mr. Brown asked for this last thing that was all done on the phone, to have that conversation, and that conversation was never had.
Mr. Brown, what were the dimensions of the last scoreboard? Was it a 40?
It was, but Mr. Zaleski is correct in what he has said. The sizes changed many times within our conversations, unfortunately. It did go from 40 to 25, where I did speak with him to let him know in order to keep things more on a level playing field, so he wasn't looking at something that wasn't apples to apples. After that point, there was changes in our meetings that, with other designs, that did increase it back up to that 40-foot range.
Okay, and you're saying about Japanese products and all this. Are you saying that OES is getting their products from overseas?
OES is the manufacturer of the scoreboard itself, just the fixed digit scoreboard
Yeah.
itself. The video board is made by a company called Lighthouse. Lighthouse is headquartered in California. They get all the product from China. And then the sound company is a third company. The manufacturer I believe they're intending to use is from Atlanta or Georgia area through a local company here in Pittsburgh. So you actually have three different manufacturers,
Okay.
but only the one is from China, and that's the video. But that's also the largest, biggest piece of this puzzle that you see. Round numbers is $100,000 of the overall thing just for the equipment.
Okay, they stated to me at the last meeting that none of their parts were from overseas, and also the main manufacturer of that screen is their manufacturer that they do themselves is in Canada. Do you know anything about Canada?
Yes. Well, and depending on who's making the comment, but my understanding and my assurance is that OES is making the scoreboard, that is made in Canada. Lighthouse is making the video board, that's made in China. The sound equipment is made by a company in Georgia.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple questions. You maintain the existing scoreboard?
I do,
For how long have you done that?
since it was installed in 2003. And for what it's worth, the scoreboard prior to that, which goes back to 1992.
So the original scoreboard was purchased from your company in 2003?
Yes.
And you've been maintaining it ever since?
Yes.
What do you think is the expected lifetime of a scoreboard?
Difficult to say unequivocally. I said at least 3 years, possibly 5. We can buy all new parts from it right now today from the factory, and other than the shell being in its existing paint condition, put all new guts in it, and it's good for another 15 or 20 years.
At what cost, though? There comes a point when you're repairing something
Right, a new scoreboard of the
versus a new
same.
scoreboard.
Well, and keep in mind, you have two parts of that scoreboard. You have an electronic sign and you have a scoreboard. That $45,000 would be for all of it. I believe what you've had most problems with, and once a year, if that's anything habitual, is only been with the scoreboard itself. If you bought a brand new scoreboard today, round numbers, $15,000, $18,000. To put all new parts in it, probably $10,000. To continue to do what we've been doing, which is repair it on an as-needed basis, depending on what's wrong, that could be, and some of the problems could be a $20 cord to a $400 driver.
Do you know how much money we've spent in the last year with your company on repairs?
Yes.
Mary Beth, you asked for just the scoreboard, or are we asking also with the marquee?
I think right now we're just looking at the scoreboard.
Well, the scoreboard and the top front, because that's what we priced
Right.
replacing, correct? So total of both. I would be interested to know what we're spending annually or,
You spent $200 this year on a repair. Last year you spent $465. In 15, you spent $460 on a repair. You also bought another control console as a backup or primary, and that was $1,100. Then in 13, you spent $845. In October of 2012, you spent $675, and I can keep going backwards. Grand
Is that
total
just a scoreboard, or is that the video on the top also?
That's just the scoreboard. There have been no video repair, message center repairs is technically what that is called.
All right.
There are no message center repairs whatsoever until you'd have to go back to '08. There was a $583 repair done on the message center.
Now, your option 1 says you can guarantee providing factory replacement parts for at least 3 more years and keep it functional for the same period of time with the 0 to 3,000 question mark. Are you able to put an absolute cap on expenditure? Or you're not able to do that?
No, because you don't know
They
what's
could
going
get
to
hit by
break.
lightning tomorrow.
Right.
It's a valid question, though.
No, it is, but yeah,
Well, we could fix it today and it'll be hit by lightning next week, so.
right. That could
Or
happen
you
with the
can
new
fix
one.
it and it would not get hit by lightning, but something could still fail because it's obviously
parts always fail.
13 or 14 years old.
Yes,
So obviously, there's no guarantee, like anything else of that age.
correct.
Sure. Mr. Brown, when you were deciding between the 25-foot width or the 40-foot width, how did that process go?
Actually, that's not.
Could you go to the mic so the folks from home could?
Actually, that is not my decision. That was brought to me with the, from the Buildings and Grounds Committee to pursue the new board, not replacing or fixing up the old one. That came in the meetings with discussions with the OES folks as far as what we wanted and how the layout of the advertising panels were and how they fit together with the video screen and the scoreboard and what we wanted to see as a scoreboard. So, and that's what it evolved to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got it.
I mean, Jerry and I have worked together since I've been here. They were here a little more recently, maybe within the last month or so. We do have issues with that board. He has always been there. I gotta give him that. I mean, we've had a good relationship. Through this whole process of what I was asked to do, it got away from repairing or keep repairing, because when it breaks in the middle of something, not when we're not using it.
That was the impression we were given last time you
Yes,
discussed
it
this.
doesn't break sitting out there now. When we're in the middle of a game and it fails, unfortunately, that's what happens.
Obviously, I'm not telling you how to do your business. Is there some kind of tune-up that is available for this old board? Instead of just fixing something as it breaks, is there any proactive kind of upgrades that would get more life out of this thing? And at what cost, obviously? And my God, we spent a lot of time talking about
In the-
scoreboard, haven't we?
In the context that you're asking, not practically, you can't always update every single digit that's in there. You can change the driver that's in there. One of the things I was gonna talk about on specifics, this is an old style digit, this is a segment, actually you can get an idea how it's coded, but this is a new one. You can see all this potting that's in here now for keep the water out and make it last longer. Well, we get these out of here and put these in there. The driver's the same way, which is the brain of the thing. Percentage-wise, I threw out a $15,000 to $18,000 for a brand new board. If we got into every single thing that we could do as far as replacing a part, you're still probably going to be in a $10,000 or $12,000 expenditure. I don't know exactly. I've got to go to the factory and price it. And that puts you back effectively with all new stuff on 0 day, starting all over again, if that makes logical sense, given what you want to do going forward. If you do want to do a big, nicer board, and there's a number of them around now, you've got one down the road that we did 2 years ago. That's kind of the push that the schools are doing. There's a lot of things that you can tie in with the kids and doing things with the TV side and stuff. And we'd like to talk more about that, because I think once you learn a little bit more about how we do things in that model, there would be some things there that will allow you to make a more informed decision that you may not be aware of right now. So not knowing ultimately what you want to go, and for what it's worth, I know that you want to pay through this through sponsorship. We have a sports marketing program that Daktronics offers. And unlike other companies, We don't take a cut of the proceeds. Once we raise the dollar amount that we need to pay for the scoreboard, we're done. And if we go above and beyond that, as far as whatever we raise through fundraising, the rest of it goes back to you 100%. In other words, we only want what covers the board. We'll put the board up, we'll support it. Anything that comes after that is gravy. It's a fairly simple agreement, not a lot of boilerplate or whatever, but it is a contract. You need to give us your rights for advertising, and then we go to market and do that for you. We have that ability to do that as well. Those are all things that, you know, we can kind of talk about, but, you know, that doesn't always come up when you're having a meeting, you know, on site and depending on what the context of what the conversations are. So do know that, though.
Mr. Zaleski, did OES give a quote for the Franklin Regional Scoreboard?
I do not know.
You do not know that? I'm surprised
not.
I'm surprised you would not know that, being
Well, let me
how
put it-
aggressive
let me-
you were
let me-
here.
A lot of stuff is bought through state contract now, but I believe Franklin was done through a public bid, if I'm not mistaken. And I believe we were the only bidder.
So pretty much a monopoly,
How so, monopoly?
meaning if you were the only bidder. Were you the exclusive contact with Franklin Regional?
I know they were talking to us as far as wanting our equipment. Again, we were there already. Most school districts like the fact that we're local. We have service availability, as Mr. Brown has talked about, responsiveness. We keep local parts here so that if it happens at, you know, 4 o'clock on a 7 o'clock kickoff, that if we're there, we can go help them out. And schools like that. And for that reason, we do very, very well in this area. One of the other things I was willing to share with the group is that, you know, just looking at football, you know, we've got 8 of the 9 6A schools. We've got 22 of the 24 5A schools. You know, 15 of the 18 4A, et cetera, all the way down the line. I think part of that is because we represent a very good manufacturer. The other, OES calls themselves the team of the pros, but if you look into the proposal that they sent to you, you see the nice big Jumbotron on the picture, but you read in the verbiage there that they only made the controlling system or the score system and maybe the shot clocks. You know, the stuff that you actually see is all done by somebody else. That's the business that Daktronics in. We do the whole system. We're doing the video, we're doing the sound, we're doing all the control, what we call super systems. The last, I don't know how many Super Bowls have all been Daktronics. The final 4 have all been at Daktronics facilities. They have established themselves as a market leader who are able to provide reliable equipment that performs at a fair price or at a competitive price. Rarely are we the low price. And as we talk about this import stuff and how they do things, you know, there's always going to be cheap stuff out there. But cheap doesn't mean it's better or that's a good fit for you. And I think when you look at the big picture and all these other things that need to be considered, I think that's what brings us to the table, Daktronics Institutional Specialties, and why we have a very strong market share in this area. Yes, we do. I'd like to think that we're kind of the best, but I don't think we're the best just because I say so. I think because we prove it with how well our products perform, when they do have problems, how quickly we can fix them, be it something that's 13 years old that we can still repair today. That's not going to happen with some of this other stuff. We already know that we lost a job, the Lighthouse down in Maryland 3 years ago, the video company, that they gave them a bunch of spare parts. They've already gone through all their spare parts, and now the board doesn't work. So they have a 6-figure investment down there, and they have a vendor, they can't support their product and put them back in business after 3 years. And I've got tons of those stories that we can tell. Daktronics on their website has a reliability lab that you can go to that, you know, we're not dumb. You know, there are other companies that are making these things, so we go get their products, we put them in a testing lab, and let's see how long they're going to last. If they're supposed to last for 100,000 hours, then they shouldn't be all discolored and not looking correctly or having problems after only 20. But that's exactly what happens, even though on paper they're supposed to all be the same, they're supposed to be equivalent. And those are the things that you need to be aware of. So that, again, to me, you're making a fairly significant big dollar item purchase. You need to know about all these things that are kind of going on, but, you know, kind of putting things back in our way. You know, North Allegheny did a big board a couple years ago. They're at Daktronics. West Allegheny did a big one last year. They were with Daktronics. You know, OES only has one board in this area that I know of that was 6 years ago down at Hempfield. And the video company that they used at that board was the company called Yesco. They don't use them anymore. So 6 years later, the same company that wants you to sell you a board, OES, is now partnered up with somebody else on the video. So what does that kind of tell you? Well, why is that if they're using, somebody that's, on the up? Now, there may be a legitimate reason for it, I don't know. But that's not going to happen with Daktronics. We do all this stuff ourselves. And I'd like to think it's not accidental that they have the percentage of the professional sports market that they do, because at that level, prices, 4 and 5 down on the list as far as the other things. You need to have the service, you need to have the reliability, because nobody wants egg on their face when the Jumbotron's messed up, during the football game. The Pirates and the Steelers originally had Sony. The word Jumbotron, that's a Sony product. Sony's not even in the business anymore. The Pirates unfortunately had to replace their Jumbotron from Sony after 3 years because they had the All-Star game coming up. The architect had originally recommended Daktronics in the construction, but the Pirates wanted to stay with Sony because they were local in Westmoreland County, so they did. But when they started having problems and Sony couldn't fix it for them, then they had to pull that video board out after 3 years and put a new one in, so that for that All-Star game early on when the PNC opened, it all looked the way that we all expected it to. And now everything down there is back to Daktronics. So that's the Daktronics story. I don't want to keep going on. I'd rather have you ask me questions. But
What is your turnaround time?
we normally have about an 8-week lead time this time of year with our equipment.
Okay.
So,
And I am
I
prepared to
saw-
offer pricing based on what,
well, I saw several emails, after this, your initial email came through. I'm not on the Building and Grounds Committee, so, I followed up with Mr. Brown, had some conversations and some of the other board members, and saw some of the email communications. And one of them didn't have the attachment because it was a mail forward, but it said November 10th, attached as a proposal. February 8th, there was a price range of $350,000. April, there was an estimate of $300,000, and April 8th, there was an estimate for $375,000. So all those costs are pretty high. I mean, to give my fellow board members a little credit, the other scoreboard is significantly less money than that. I know you're talking about your quality, but we're already getting, a lot of heat for spending this kind of money on a scoreboard, and yours is coming in at like $100,000 more.
well, and that was 100,000 based on what I thought we were doing, and keeping in mind that there are inclusions that the way we normally do things, as I've said to, others before, there's the right way and then there's the cheap way. Based on what I was able to find out, and also through the specifications to see what they were offering with sizes and resolutions and some of that included equipment. And that's what I have kind of listed down there in the bottom of that sheet. Those are the differences based on what we were talking about on a budgetary nature versus what OES was proposing, in their proposal. And those are all real costs. I mean, 8% doesn't sound like much, but when you're talking about an $800,000 scoreboard, that's $8,000 and just in one item. And so you make some of the comparisons that need to be made to try to get to apples and apples, and now all of a sudden, things that we had included that I would have expected that you would have wanted, well, now those costs can come out of our proposal, and so a $300,000 number can become $250 or $225 or whatever it's going to become.
Did you prepare an actual apples to apples bid, or do you not know exactly what was bid by OES?
Well, I know, I have an idea on the scoreboard, I have an idea on the video board. The sound is an open item, that there was no information, on that. I can make an educated guess, yes, but I think, a lot of times with these, a district will put together a set of criteria that, something in writing, that when they're soliciting, call it an RFI, request for information, or request for RFP, request for proposals, to try to get those vendors all into something similar, because no one's going to be identical, but that didn't happen here. All we had were conversations, and as we've heard, that it changed a lot. It was always a moving, fluid thing. Do we have 2 sponsors? Do we have 8 sponsors? How big do we want to be? In our case, we have a sound cabinet. Do we want to put the gator on that? Do we, we want to do build more material on the, and all this stuff that kind of evolves. And by the way, we need to do this and do that, and that's where I'm saying, until it all gets qualified, I've got soft costs in there for what I believe you're going to need to be done, but then if I later find out that they're not being included by others, then yeah, now I look silly or I'm at a disadvantage because I know you're going to need to be done, but no one's put a number to it.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
I mean, you're the man, you have to know this. The other company, the OES, they said that their pixel, what the heck?
Pixel pitch, mm-hmm.
Was a lot clearer than yours because you just have 3 and they have 4.
Okay, you're gonna get educated on pixels. This is the design that they are talking about. You can see that the LEDs, there's 3 of them in a little circle, that's called a pixel. And then you have rows and columns of those. Depending on the spacing of those pixels, that's your resolution. This particular one is a 16 millimeter and probably very similar to what's being proposed by Lighthouse. We have an equivalent to it. Obviously, this is a spare part for a school here locally. This is the design that we now are doing, and we do this at all the pro stadiums. This is called an HD layout. The difference is you can see how the LEDs are in columns, but the difference is you have to look at individual LED colors and look at the row of where a red is next to the next adjacent row of reds, and think of lines and columns and scaling and resolution. Okay. The other thing that this does is with this type of a layout, and I have a photo that again, at the right time, because the LEDs are spread out like this, you don't have what we call shouldering. When you look at a side angle thing, that this, okay, better off, this red LED is over here on the side, so if you're looking from this angle, that red LED is going to be blocked by the 2 adjacent LEDs. So in a stadium where side angle viewing is critical, that becomes an issue. You lose your image. Whereas in this type of a layout, you don't have that problem because you don't have the shouldering. The other thing that happens, we worry a lot about contrast. These louvers that are in here, the roofs that are over these LEDs, that provides for shading. What we have found that you want to maximize the contrast, make this background as black as possible, so that when you're looking at it from a distance, that image pops off the screen. But what happens to this black material with some manufacturers, it grays as it gets old. It also, with the sun, if it's not done right, then the sun gets on there and it washes out that you can't see the image. With this type of a design, you can see that that you've got some curving kind of going on here. There's texture on this stuff that absorbs that light so it doesn't become reflective light, all of which helps your contrast in viewing. But we have plenty of photographs that I can show you, the old style design, if you will, versus the new style. But that's a typical comment from other companies that don't understand how this stuff really works and what really has proven to be better viewing for a customer in the marketplace. These are easier and cheaper to build. This is a little bit more expensive, but the result is it's a much better image that you'll be able to see, which is why we do it this way. This is what the Steelers have. This is what the Pirates have. This is what I was going to propose to you. This is what I had been proposing to you. I have this, and had I known that, okay, OES is in, and we're okay with this, well then, all right, well then I'll propose this, and then we can talk about what the upcharge is to do something like that. But as I said before, there's the right way of doing things, and then there's the inexpensive way of doing things. And I usually start over here with the right way.
Did you do the one down at the PPG Center? No, who? I mean, I was down there. I was down there. Now, you were doing, like you said, stadiums. Now, do you know who did the one at the, where the Penguins are?
Penguins are actually, the video board was made by Mitsubishi. So that's going to be overseas. OES did do the scoring system, and they have the shot clocks for basketball. But that's it. They're going to show you a picture of the, what we're all looking at, the video board. The difference is that, that's what we do. But that's not what OES does.
Can you go to the mic close?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Can hear you at home.
That's not what they do, and that's why, again, that proposal that was there, if you look into the fine print, those are some of the things that you need to be aware of. I've talked about, they call themselves the choice of the pros, but I've got a slide here, and this one thing that I was going to leave with all you guys, and I've gone over most of it, so I may as well give you the books at this point. I've got a slide here that, Daktronics is installed in 93% of all NFL stadiums. OES says they're installed at 25. Well, the thing about that is, yeah, they have a few systems, but if they have delay of game clocks in the practice site, well, that got counted as an NFL facility. I'm talking about jumbotrons and those kind of things. For baseball, it's at 86%. Hockey, it's 76. They're at 39. NBA, we're in 68. They're at 47. And the only reason I make that comparative, and especially want to emphasize the outside stuff, Daktronics does very, very well in the outdoor market because those customers realize that this stuff has to live its whole life outside. It's going to be abused by the weather. It's going to be under the most extreme testing. And so if you're going to, again, make those kind of investments, then, put it with a company that can support that and back that up with performance. And then you have it to a certain degree in the indoor market as well, but, not as much. If that makes sense as far as the durability of the product.
Okay, I'm going to throw this out. And I think we should wrap this up with the scoreboard. I don't know, does anybody have?
Why don't we just devote another night for this?
Well, I'm just saying,
No,
okay,
seriously,
how about putting together a quote for the football, baseball, softball, the marquee? See what kind of discount we could do.
I can do that. I'll need to know exactly what you want, though. I need some specific
Need
firm.
some guidance.
Well, you must have the dimensions, everything for the scoreboard, for the football stadium scoreboard, from what I'm gathering, because you're bringing up a lot of what was proposed by OES.
Only to make the comparison with what they've offered
I
in
mean,
this specific thing.
it sounds like you know what they've offered.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Well, but I also don't want to be judgmental. A 16-foot wide baseball scoreboard that, has the score and
Well-
digits and little dots may be more than adequate here for Gateway, but it won't be adequate for some other school district in town who wants the full inning by inning board, and may even want a message center in there too.
Well, I'm just, and I said that about the other scoreboards, but I'm just saying with, as far as the stadium scoreboard, it sounds like you have this, specifics and everything. I don't know how you got them, but,
They were on your minutes or whatever from the board meeting,
okay.
to be
I'm just
forthright.
gonna throw this out here, so so we're being transparent. If you could put a quote together, he's chair of the Building and Grounds, I think you would agree, George, so we don't,
Yeah, to be fair, we'll be fair with you. We thought we were fair because, you gave us a quote, I don't know, in March or whatever, but you're saying now that wasn't your final quote, right?
Correct. Those were always
Okay.
budgetary.
Okay. And I want to be fair with this board, coming back with everything we found. If you, Mr. Brown, and Mr. Short, Dr. Short could get together and make a time that you could bring all this information in and we could give you the figures of everything, the dimensions of everything, then you could go do your work and tell us what you can do for us and be fair with us.
I would very much like that.
because we're looking at a first football game in August, so, that's why I'm asking the turnaround time.
May I ask one more question?
No?
You said that you have this marketing department. Did you use that with Franklin Regional? Did they take advantage of that?
No, they did that on their own.
And that's one other thing I didn't know about your firm. You never did mention to us about marketing, your marketing ability. And, that would be a plus towards you because you're doing a lot of legwork for us. You understand this? Instead of us hiring a PR, whatever the hell we have to do, you have the connections. And
Yeah,
that
we have
would,
a whole division of the company, that's all they do.
and that would help us more than you could think.
Okay, I can do that.
Dr. Short, do you have a deadline that you need this by? I'm just gonna put that
I
out
would
there.
defer to the board at this point, to be honest with you. This
You
is,
guys got.
This is the board decision to make.
How does, I'm gonna refer this
I'll get, yeah. What's that?
to you when you need this bid in.
I'd like to have it done within the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, well, within the week, I think. Let's agree to a day to meet, and then I can,
Monday.
The Building and Grounds Committee could meet with this gentleman.
How about
I think
Monday?
that would be good.
Are you open on Monday, Bob?
Sure, I'll find time.
Okay, let's find it. What time, 11 o'clock?
I know he's got a crew to get going,
Why
but
don't you
I
not
do
put him on
early.
a pressure? Why don't you call him tomorrow and work it out?
Yeah.
Go from there.
Let's do it
Okay,
now.
11 o'clock Monday. Meet you at his office.
Is that a firm date, or do we need to talk?
No, he said it was okay to him.
The Building and Grounds Committee could probably meet with Mr. Brown and this gentleman right here.
Yeah, that's fine with us.
All right, so Jack secretly whispered in my ear, a good question here. Are we still talking about perhaps repairing the old scoreboard or going with a new scoreboard? Now, if it's true that we want to reconsider this, could we limp through the next football season with the current scoreboard, which would buy us enough time to get a better scoreboard put in there? In other words, if it takes 8 weeks and we don't have this meeting and make a decision awfully quick, we're going to miss the opening of football season here. And so we don't want to miss our window. If we don't want to miss our window, then one option is to limp through with the existing scoreboard for another season. That's all I'm saying.
Basically gives us 30 days to get our sponsor lined up.
Well, I was gonna say, if you'd like us to pursue the sponsorship thing, that will take a little bit of time to get in place and enact, which pretty much puts this season out, unless you wanna do it in the middle of the season, but.
So we have to hurry way up.
I think I'm in agreement with you, John, that no matter what, obviously this is, the Building and Grounds Committee is going to be holding the meeting and everything, but one of the vital pieces of information I want to know is to replace, critical parts, critical pieces of the existing scoreboard to give us another 3 to 5 years of life with relatively low maintenance costs. That's kind of the number that I'm definitely interested in, on top of comparative number with the OES proposal.
Anything else, guys?
Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you, appreciate the time.
Thank you, Jerry.
Anybody else wants to address this